Dorothy Hart is 24, black, American-born, and carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who has never allowed herself to stop moving. The granddaughter of a Nigerian immigrant who taught her that food was love made tangible. Dorothy grew up in a household rich in culture and short on money, which is why the live-in housekeeping position at the Bale estate, paying more than anything she'd earned before, felt like the answer to a prayer she'd been too practical to say out loud. 6 months in, she has built careful walls around herself, professional distance, pleasant smiles, no unnecessary conversation with the man who signs her paychecks. Henry Bale is not what she expected. He is not loud or careless or arrogant the way wealthy white men in stories tend to be. He is measured, thoughtful, the kind of quiet that makes a room feel different when he enters it. Dorothy has spent 6 months pretending not to notice that. Then one exhausted Friday afternoon, with Thanksgiving preparation consuming the entire estate, her body simply gives up the fight, and she falls asleep in the one place she was never supposed to be, Henry's bed. What follows is not a scandal. It is not a firing. It is something far more dangerous. A beginning. 2 people who have spent their lives managing distance are suddenly, irreversibly, unable to maintain it. Neither of them is ready. Both of them are already too late. The Bale estate appeared on the hill like something from a different century. Stone and symmetry, tall windows catching the October light and throwing it back in shards of gold. Dorothy Hart stood at the end of the driveway on her first day and told herself, very firmly, that she was not impressed. She had been impressed before, by jobs that looked like answers and turned out to be new versions of the same problems. By employers who smiled warmly during interviews and became entirely different people by the second week. She had learned, in the specific way that women who worked in wealthy white households learned things, to hold her reactions in reserve until she understood exactly what she was walking into. 6 months later, she understood. The estate was exactly what it looked like. Large, well-maintained, and run with quiet precision by a man who never raised his voice and somehow never needed to. Henry Bale was not what she'd braced herself for. That, she had decided, was its own kind of problem. The kitchen was Dorothy's favorite part of the estate. It was large enough to feel professional, but designed with the kind of warmth that made it feel like it had always hosted people. Heavy marble countertops, a farmhouse sink with a window above it looking out over the side garden, copper pots hanging from a ceiling rack, and a range, a beautiful, 6-burner, restaurant-grade range that was genuinely the most magnificent appliance she had ever encountered in her life. She had feelings about the range. She kept this private. She also had feelings, considerably less welcome, about the man who owned it. Dorothy cracked eggs into a ceramic bowl and reminded herself of her rules. Professional, efficient, invisible when possible. She was here to do a job, to save money, to eventually open the small bakery she had been sketching plans for since she was 19. A bakery built on her grandmother Mama Titi's recipes. Chin Chin, Puff Puff, Suya Spice, remade with modern technique. Offered to people who might never have tasted them before, and people who would taste them and weep quietly from recognition. She was not here to notice the way Henry Bale moved through his own house like someone who had been taught to take up exactly the right amount of space and no more. She was absolutely not here for that. Henry Bale came downstairs at 7:15 every weekday morning. Dorothy knew this, the way she knew all operational details of the house, thoroughly, because thoroughness kept you employed. She knew which rooms needed more attention on rainy days. She knew which cleaning products Mrs. Adeyemi, the head housekeeper, refused to allow near her sinuses. She knew which steps on the 3rd-floor staircase creaked if you weren't careful. She had not intended to also know that Henry took his coffee black with no sugar, that he always said good morning to every member of staff by name, that he kept a small photograph on his desk of 2 people she'd never asked about, that when he was working through something difficult, he stood at the tall study window and looked out at the garden for exactly as long as it took him to solve the problem. She knew these things the way you know things you've been trying not to collect. He came downstairs at 7:15. He said, "Good morning, Dorothy," in a voice that was unhurried and low, the same way every morning. She said, "Good morning, Mr. Bale," and did not watch him walk to the coffee station. She absolutely did not watch him walk to the coffee station. "You're humming again." Dorothy's hands stilled on the marble countertop. She turned to find Mrs. Adeyemi in the kitchen doorway, 60 years old, built like someone who had decided long ago she would not be moved by anything, and had kept that promise, wearing the expression she reserved for things she found simultaneously amusing and unnecessary. "I wasn't," Dorothy said. "You were." Mrs. Adeyemi moved to the coffee station with the authority of someone who had been in this house longer than most of the furniture. "You hum when you bake. You've always done it. It's not a complaint." "Then why mention it?" "Because," the older woman said, pouring with the precision of a scientist. "He walked past the kitchen door this morning and slowed down." Dorothy did not ask who he was. There was only one he that Mrs. Adeyemi said with that particular weight. "People slow down for lots of reasons," Dorothy said carefully. Mrs. Adeyemi looked at her over her mug with the expression of a woman who had been watching young people lie to themselves since before Dorothy was born. "Yes," she said, "they do." She left without another word, which was, Dorothy had learned, her preferred method of winning arguments. The week before Thanksgiving, the estate shifted. Not dramatically, but Dorothy felt it the way you feel weather changing. A difference in pressure, in the quality of light, in the particular alertness that entered Henry's posture when he made phone calls with the study door slightly ajar. His family was coming. Mrs. Adeyemi had delivered the briefing with her laminated schedule, because Mrs. Adeyemi laminated everything, and assignment sheets for all staff. 12 family members. Thursday arrival. Full Thanksgiving hosting. Dorothy looked at her assignment list. The second floor was her primary responsibility. 4 guest rooms, the main hallway, and at the bottom, in Mrs. Adeyemi's careful cursive, Mr. Bale's suite. Fresh linens, surfaces, towel replacement. She had cleaned Henry's suite before, several times, always when he was out. She had moved through it with professional efficiency and emerged without incident. She looked at the assignment sheet. This week felt different. She told herself it didn't. By Thursday morning, every guest room on the second floor smelled of fresh linen and cedar. Every surface gleamed, and Dorothy's feet had been hurting since Tuesday. She had taken extra shifts willingly. Each additional paycheck was another line in the notebook she kept in her room, a running total, added to every week, slowly becoming the number that meant bakery deposit. Dorothy's Bakes. She had 12 name options, written and crossed out and rewritten. A color scheme, warm cream and sage green, because Mama Titi's kitchen had been those exact colors and the memory lived in her chest like something permanent. A mental floor plan. Display cases along the front window, small cafe tables with mismatched chairs. The smell of butter and cardamom and brown sugar greeting every customer at the door. She had everything except enough money. So she took the extra shifts. Her feet hurt. She did not complain. By Thursday afternoon, one task remained on her assignment sheet. Mr. Bale's suite. She picked up her caddy and her fresh linens and went upstairs. Henry's bedroom was at the end of the hall. Dorothy knocked twice, waited, knocked again. Silence. She opened the door. The room was large and composed. Dark wood furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk near the window with neat stacks of paper, and a single framed photograph she had never looked at directly. The curtains were open, and the afternoon light came in at a low amber angle that turned everything warm and slow. The bed was enormous, a California king in cream and white, with the kind of mattress that looked like it cost more than her first 3 months of salary combined. Dorothy set down her caddy and got to work. Surfaces first. Windows. Bathroom. She stripped the bed with practiced speed, wrestled the fresh-fitted sheet on with the focused effort that large beds required, smoothed the duvet cover with the care she gave all her work. She plumped the last pillow. She stood back. Her lower back ached. Her feet throbbed. She had been awake, essentially, since Wednesday morning. She sat on the edge of the bed, just for a moment, just 30 seconds. The mattress was softer than anything she had ever felt in her life. Not soft in a sinking, swallowing way. Soft in the way that good things were soft. A quality of rest that the body recognized before the mind could argue with it. 30 seconds, Dorothy thought. Just 30. She shifted slightly, meaning to stand up. The afternoon light was warm on her face. Her eyelids were heavy in the specific way of someone who has been borrowing energy for 2 days and has just run out of credit. 30 seconds, she thought again, already losing track of the number. The last thing she registered was the faint scent of cedar and clean cotton, the distant sound of voices somewhere on the estate grounds below, and the particular dangerous comfort of a body that had simply, finally, had enough. Sleep didn't creep up on Dorothy Hart. It claimed her completely. Henry Bale returned to the estate at 6:47 in the evening. He knew the time because he'd checked his phone in the car, calculating whether he could change before the pre-dinner gathering his mother had already organized for 7 o'clock. He had. Barely. The ground floor was warm and alive. Lights in all the front rooms, voices overlapping, the organized energy of 12 people settling into a house. His mother's voice carried from the direction of the sitting room, which meant she had found either something to critique or something to reorganize, and it was probably both, done simultaneously. He went in through the side entrance, exchanged a few words with his aunt, reassured his cousin Marcus that yes, the Thanksgiving menu accounted for his dietary situation. He had confirmed this personally with Mrs. Adeyemi. Then he made his way upstairs to change. The second floor was quiet. He reached his door. It was slightly ajar. He stopped. A pair of white sneakers sat neatly beside his bed. Henry looked at them for a moment, then at the figure curled on top of his cream duvet. He recognized her immediately. The gray uniform, the 4C natural hair fully loose now and spread around her head against the pillow, the particular way she held herself even in unconsciousness. One hand tucked beneath her cheek as though protecting something even in sleep. Dorothy. Henry stood in the doorway of his own bedroom and did not move for longer than he would later admit to. She had clearly sat down, meaning to rest for a moment. That was evident from everything. The position, the fact that she was on top of the covers, the cleaning caddy still sitting near the door, her shoes placed with the neat precision of someone who had not intended to stay. He should wake her. He knew he should wake her, knew it the way he sometimes knew the correct course of action, and stood for a moment simply looking at the situation first. He looked at her face instead. Dorothy Hart was composed during working hours. Efficient, careful with her expressions, with her words, with the precise degree of warmth she extended. He had noticed this about her because he did the same thing himself, and because you recognized in other people the armor you wore. Asleep, she wore none of it. There was nothing careful about her face when she slept. She looked like someone who had been tired for a long time and had finally, accidentally, been allowed to stop. The room had grown cold. Henry noticed it the way he noticed details, not because he was searching, but because they registered. The sun had dropped. The estate heating hadn't compensated yet on this floor. Dorothy was on top of the duvet, technically beneath her, providing zero warmth. He looked at this situation for approximately 3 seconds. Then he crossed the room carefully. He lifted the far edge of the duvet, a movement that required a specific quality of slowness, no sudden shifts in the mattress. No sound, and he was aware even as he did it that this was an unusual thing to be doing, that the sensible part of him had noted the available alternatives and been overruled by something else. He drew the duvet over her. She shifted. A soft sound, barely a sound, and she pulled the duvet closer in sleep, her dark hands gathering the cream fabric, turning her face slightly into the pillow. Henry straightened up. Something in his chest had moved without his permission. He stood there for one more moment. Then he left his own bedroom and went to sleep in the East guest suite. He lay in the guest suite's unfamiliar bed and stared at the ceiling. Henry was a man who slept efficiently. He had trained himself to. Long days, early mornings, a schedule that didn't accommodate restlessness. He was usually asleep within 15 minutes of lying down. Tonight he looked at the ceiling of the East guest suite for nearly an hour. He was not thinking about her face. He was not thinking about the way her hands had gathered the duvet in sleep. Automatic, trusting, completely unaware of him. He was not thinking about the fact that he had just voluntarily left his own bedroom because waking her had seemed, in the moment, like the worse option. Not the inappropriate option, the worse one. Those were different things. He was not thinking about any of that. He attributed the sleeplessness to the unfamiliar mattress. He was aware, distantly, that he was not a convincing liar even to himself. Dorothy woke up to full committed morning sunlight. She sat up. She was in a bed. A very large bed. A very large bed that was emphatically not her bed, covered in a duvet that she had definitely not been under when she sat down because she had been sitting on top of the duvet when the complete sequence of events arrived in her memory in approximately 3 seconds. Every blood cell she possessed went directly to her face. She looked around the room, Henry's tasteful and thoroughly damning bedroom, and found it empty. His suit jacket, which had been on the valet stand, was gone. His shoes were gone. The room was orderly and undisturbed except for her, sitting in the middle of his bed like someone who had made a catastrophically poor professional decision. She looked at the bedside clock, 7:48. She had been in her employer's bed for approximately 14 hours. Her employer, who was a white man, whose household she worked in whose bed she had apparently decided to spend the night. This was fine. This was absolutely fine. She was absolutely going to be fired. She put on her shoes. She picked up her caddy. She smoothed the duvet, the automatic professionalism of someone who tidied up her own disasters. And then she stood in the middle of Henry's room and tried to construct a version of events that ended with her keeping her job. Nothing convincing presented itself. She went downstairs anyway. The ground floor was alive with Friday morning. Henry's family filling the sitting room and kitchen, the smell of coffee and toast and someone's perfume. Voices overlapping in the comfortable chaos of a large family the morning after arrival. Dorothy moved along the edges of it, staying close to walls, her cleaning caddy in hand, her 4C hair entirely loose and unpinned because she had not had time to deal with it, and this was, she recognized, the least of her current problems. She heard him before she saw him, a low, unhurried voice near the study doorway, saying something to his aunt. She turned. He was already looking at her. Henry Bale stood across the foyer in a dark green sweater and charcoal trousers, coffee mug held loosely in one hand. He was looking at her, not with alarm, not with the expression of an employer preparing an uncomfortable conversation. He was looking at her the same way he had looked at her from the doorway the night before, except this time she was awake to see it, which was significantly worse. There was a moment of approximately 4 years' duration in which neither of them moved. The foyer was full of his family. None of them appeared to be watching this specific exchange. Then Henry said with the composure of a man who had absolutely not spent an hour staring at a guest suite ceiling, "Did you sleep well?" Dorothy's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Something moved at the corner of Henry's mouth. So brief, she couldn't be certain it had happened. He turned back to his aunt and resumed whatever conversation she had interrupted. Dorothy stood in the foyer with her caddy and her loose hair and the complete ruins of her professional composure and understood, with the specific clarity of someone who has just had the ground shift beneath their feet, that something had changed. She didn't know yet what to call it. She knew it anyway. She avoided him for the rest of Friday morning. This was not difficult. 12 family members created sufficient movement throughout the estate that she could work efficiently without sharing a room with Henry for more than the time it took to cross a doorway. She served coffee in the sitting room. She assisted in the kitchen. She managed the second-floor hallway and delivered extra towels to the East guest suite without acknowledging, even internally, why that room had been slept in. She did all of this with the efficiency and pleasantness she considered her professional baseline. By noon, she had almost convinced herself that the foyer exchange had meant nothing. A polite question from a considerate employer. Completely normal. Then she walked past the study and Henry, working at his desk with the door half open, said without looking up, "There are cinnamon rolls in the kitchen if you haven't eaten." "Mrs. Adeyemi mentioned you'd skipped breakfast." Dorothy stopped walking. "Thank you," she said, very professionally. She went to the kitchen. There were cinnamon rolls. She sat at the small staff table and ate one and told herself, "He is considerate with everyone. This is nothing." She ate a second one. Considerate employers notice when staff haven't eaten, she thought. It means nothing. She almost believed it. Almost. By Thanksgiving afternoon, Dorothy had cataloged Henry's family without intending to. Eleanor Bale, elegant, warm, clearly the organizational intelligence of the entire family. The kind of woman who remembered what you mentioned in passing 6 months ago and brought it up at exactly the right moment. Robert Bale, large, deliberate, quiet in the specific way that communicated quiet authority. 2 aunts, 1 uncle, 3 cousins, and 2 small children who belonged to the eldest cousin, recently married, visibly exhausted, grateful whenever anyone else engaged with their offspring. The children were named Theo and Lily, 5 and 3, currently watching Dorothy arrange the Thanksgiving table settings with the focused intensity that small children reserve for things they found genuinely interesting. "You make it pretty," Lily announced. "Thank you," Dorothy said. "The napkins look like flowers." "They do. Do you want to see how?" 20 minutes later, she was crouched at the end of the long Thanksgiving table, teaching a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old to fold napkins into fan shapes. And she was laughing at something Theo had said about how the napkin looked like his teacher's hair. And she was, for the first time in 3 days, entirely herself. She didn't notice Henry had come to stand near the doorway until she straightened up from showing Lily the finished fold. He was watching her with his family's children the same way he'd watched her from his doorway the night she'd fallen asleep. That same quality of stillness, that same expression she hadn't yet found a name for. Thanksgiving dinner at the Bale estate was not casual. It was also, unexpectedly, deeply warm. Dorothy had assumed, from the scale of the house, from the elegance of the preparations, that it would be formal in the way wealthy white family gatherings sometimes were, beautiful and distant, more performance than celebration. It wasn't. Henry's family was loud and funny and interrupted each other constantly and laughed at references that required 12 years of shared history to understand. Eleanor made a toast that became 4 toasts, that became a good-natured argument about who had started the tradition of the sweet potato dish, resolved only when Robert said, very peacefully, that it had been him, and everyone went quiet because Robert Bale did not make things up. Dorothy moved through it all, refilling, clearing, the practiced invisibility of good service, and she thought, this is what this house is for. Not for the marble or the library or the view from the upper windows. For this, 12 people around a table being completely themselves. She glanced at Henry once, across the room. He was laughing at something his cousin had said, and for a moment his face was entirely open. She looked away quickly. She was getting worse at looking away quickly. She was in the kitchen at 9:15, washing the larger serving pieces, when the door opened behind her. She turned. Henry stood in the doorway in his green sweater, holding 2 empty serving platters. "You don't need to," she started. "I know," he said. He set them beside the sink. A pause. Through the walls, his family's voices filtered, distant and warm, the sound of an evening winding happily down. "It was a good night," Henry said. He was looking at the dishes, not at her. "Your family is wonderful," Dorothy said. She meant it entirely. Something moved in his expression. "They are." She turned back to the washing, because having something to do with her hands was currently essential. "You were good with Theo and Lily," he said, quietly. Dorothy's hands stilled under the warm water. "They're easy to be good with," she said. "They wanted to learn. You taught them something they'll probably do every Thanksgiving from now on." She didn't know what to say to that. Henry picked up a dish towel. She turned and looked at him. He was a white man in a green sweater in his own kitchen, preparing to dry dishes that she was absolutely paid to handle, with the expression of someone who had decided to do this and didn't require discussion about it. "You don't need to dry the dishes," she said. "I know," he said. He started drying. They washed dishes in silence for 4 minutes. Dorothy counted, not because she was anxious. She was a little anxious, but because silence with Henry had a specific texture, not empty, not uncomfortable exactly, full of things that neither of them were saying. "Can I ask you something?" she said, without deciding to. He looked at her. "Why didn't you wake me?" "Thursday night, when you came back." The question had been in her chest since Friday morning, and she had not intended to release it, but it was out now. And Henry was looking at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize as the one he wore when he was being completely honest. "You looked like you needed it," he said. Simple, no performance in it. "You didn't have to sleep in the guest suite," she said. "I know." He handed her a dried pot. Henry, his name, first name. She heard herself use it a half second after it was already too late to take it back. He didn't react to it. Or rather, he went very still for just a moment, the way still water registers a change. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me for that," he said. Why not? He picked up another dish and looked at it. Because, Henry said quietly, a person shouldn't have to be grateful for being allowed to rest. Dorothy looked at the soap bubbles dissolving on her dark hands. Something tightened in her throat that had nothing to do with professional relationships and everything to do with the fact that no one had ever said anything quite like that to her before. Not in those words. Not like it was simply obvious. The family left in stages across Friday and Saturday. Dorothy watched it happen from the margins. Luggage in hallways, final meals, the particular bittersweet energy of a gathering, drawing closed. Theo and Lily were dispatched last, Lily presenting Dorothy with a crayon drawing of what appeared to be a napkin flower before being carried to the car by her father. Dorothy received it with appropriate gravity. She put it on her dresser. She did not examine too closely why she did that. By Saturday evening, the house was quiet again. The kind of quiet that followed fullness. The rooms still holding the shape of what had recently filled them. Dorothy sat at the kitchen staff table with tea and her bakery notebook and told herself she was doing planning work. She was doing planning work. She was not thinking about the dish drying. She was not thinking about a person shouldn't have to be grateful for being allowed to rest. She was absolutely doing planning work. Is that a floor plan? Dorothy looked up so fast she knocked her mug. She caught it, tea sloshed but didn't spill, and found Henry in the kitchen doorway. He was in a charcoal Henley and dark jeans, which was startlingly different from his usual working wardrobe, holding a book he'd apparently been reading before something had brought him to the kitchen. No, she said. Then, yes, sort of. He looked at the notebook. She should close it. She almost did. Instead, she heard herself say, "It's a bakery." Henry came into the kitchen. He had every right to. It was his kitchen. And he moved differently in the evenings, she noticed, with less of the day's structure on him, more like a person, and less like a CEO. "Your bakery," he said. "Someday." He looked at the open page, the rough floor plan, the equipment list, the color notes in the margin, the name options crossed out and rewritten. He read quietly for a moment. "Warm cream and sage green," he said. "For the walls. And the packaging. What kind of bakery?" She hesitated. This felt, somehow, like the most personally revealing conversation she had ever had in this kitchen. And she had accidentally slept in his bed. "Pastry," she said. "Nigerian American. My grandmother's recipes with modern technique. She came here from Lagos in 1987 and she made chin-chin and puff-puff and suya for every occasion I ever had. I want to give those things to people who've never had them, and people who had them every Sunday growing up." She said it quickly, like pulling off a bandage. Henry looked at her. "That sounds," he said, "genuinely excellent." He sat down, not across from her, beside her, angling to see the notebook better. And Dorothy adjusted her grip on it and told her heartbeat to settle down, because this was a normal thing that was happening in a kitchen. "Chin-chin croissants," Henry said. "Walk me through that." And just like that, she was comfortable. Talking about baking was the most comfortable she'd been in 4 days, and she would take it gratefully. "The lamination," she said. "Chin-chin has this specific crunch, not flaky like a standard croissant, denser, more structured. I've been developing a hybrid dough that has the layered architecture, but uses the chin-chin flavoring, nutmeg, vanilla, sometimes coconut milk in the butter layer. You bake it at a slightly lower temperature, so the interior stays just barely chewy." Henry was listening with the quality of attention he gave to things he found genuinely interesting, not politely. "Actually, have you made it?" "Many times. I've tested it on Mrs. Adeyemi." A pause. "She told me it was acceptable." Something happened in Henry's expression, something in the corner of his mouth, quiet and real. "High praise," he said. "The highest she gives." For a moment, they were simply two people in a kitchen. The distance between them was the width of a notebook and considerably nothing else. Mrs. Adeyemi found them at 10:15. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, took in the scene, a young black woman and her white employer at a staff table, a notebook between them, tea going cold. Neither of them appearing to notice the time, with the expression of someone who was not surprised and intended to remember this very carefully. "I'm going to bed," she said, addressing Dorothy specifically. "Morning prep starts at 6. "I know," Dorothy said. 6. Mrs. Adeyemi said again, making the word carry approximately 3 sentences worth of meaning. She left. A pause settled. I should, Dorothy started. Of course, Henry said, standing. He picked up his book from the counter. There was a moment, briefer than the previous ones but heavier, in which they were both standing in the warm kitchen and neither was moving toward the door. Dorothy, Henry said. She looked at him. Thank you for tonight. She blinked. We washed dishes and I talked about pastry technique. Yes, he said. Thank you. He left. Dorothy stood in the kitchen and looked at the empty doorway. Don't, she told herself. She closed her notebook. Don't you dare do this. Sunday passed. Henry worked. Dorothy worked. The estate resumed its regular rhythms. If those rhythms had shifted, if Tuesday morning's baking felt different with the knowledge that someone had asked her to explain it, if the way she moved through rooms had changed in some barely perceptible way, she did not acknowledge it out loud. She acknowledged the notebook. On Monday evening, she added 4 new pages of ideas, spurred by having explained the existing ones to someone who had listened with actual attention rather than polite tolerance. The bakery felt more real after one kitchen conversation than it had in 3 years of private planning. She did not acknowledge why. She told herself it was simply useful to articulate things out loud. She sat with that for approximately 6 minutes before writing Chin Chin Croissant, reduce nutmeg by versus TSP, increase coconut milk ratio, try brown butter in lamination layer. She did not write anything else. The shift happened gradually, and then all at once. Henry began saying good morning to her specifically, before anyone else in the house, not pointedly, but Dorothy noticed. She noticed because she noticed everything about the way this house worked, and this was new. The study door was open more often. He appeared in the kitchen on 3 separate evenings with plausible reasons, and on at least 2 of those evenings, the plausible reason was not present in the kitchen. Dorothy logged all of it somewhere internal and marked it, uncertain, exercise caution. She also baked Eleanor Bale's favorite tea cake. She'd overheard it mentioned during Thanksgiving dinner, and left a neat white box of them in the entry hall when Eleanor returned briefly to collect something she'd forgotten. Eleanor called the house. Dorothy didn't hear the call, but Mrs. Adeyemi relayed it later with excessive casualness, the way she relayed things she intended Dorothy to absorb fully. She said, she made the tea cakes. And, Dorothy said. And he said, yes. And? Mrs. Adeyemi poured her tea, and she said, Henry, and that was the end of the conversation. Dorothy thought about that for longer than she intended. The second kitchen evening happened 10 days after the first. She was testing a new iteration of the Chin Chin Croissant, adjusting the brown butter ratio in the lamination, when Henry walked in at 9:30 and stopped in the kitchen doorway. Is that? Yes, she said, already reaching for a plate. Sit down. He sat down. She put a croissant in front of him without ceremony, the way she imagined she'd serve customers someday. Here, I made this. Tell me what's true about it. Henry picked it up and bit into it. She watched his face with the focus of a professional waiting for data. His expression did the thing that happened when something was genuinely good, where the real reaction arrived before the socially organized response had time to assemble. His eyes closed briefly, then opened. Dorothy, the brown butter, she said immediately. Too much? No. He looked at the croissant, then at her. It's perfect. The interior texture is perfect, he said again, with a quiet finality that left no room for argument. He looked at her across the small kitchen table, a white man in a dark Henley, her notebook between them, a croissant on a plate, the warm kitchen around them, and said, you need to open this bakery. The warmth that moved through her at that sentence was entirely too large for what it was. I'm working on it, she said. Good, Henry said. Like it mattered. Like she mattered. Like the answer to everything was simply and quietly. Good. She told Amaka about it that night on video call. Amaka was her best friend since freshman year of college, currently in Atlanta, currently holding her phone at the angle that showed mostly ceiling, currently listening to Dorothy explain the situation with the patient energy of someone who had been doing this for 6 years. So, Amaka said when she finished, you fell asleep in his bed. He covered you with a blanket, gave up his own room, Told you that you don't have to earn rest. Listened to you talk about pastry for 2 hours. Made you feel like your bakery is actually real." She paused. "And you're here telling me about it like it's a situation." "It is a situation," Dorothy said. "He's my employer. He's white. I work in his house, Amaka." "I understand the dynamic," Amaka said, in the tone of someone who understood the dynamic and was not dismissing it. "I'm also asking you, what part of how he treats you reads like a man who sees you as an employee?" Dorothy was quiet. "The blanket part," Amaka said. "That's the part. A man who covered you with a blanket and then slept somewhere else so you could rest undisturbed. That's not professional courtesy, Dot. He's considerate with everyone. Has he dried dishes with everyone?" Dorothy did not answer. "Call me," Amaka said gently, "when you've caught up with what's already happening." She was watering the hallway plants, hers by default, because Mrs. Adiemi trusted her with the more delicate specimens, when she heard Henry on the phone in the study. She wasn't listening, she was watering. But the door was open, and his voice carried, and she heard, "I don't have the energy for this conversation right now, Mother." A pause. Then, quieter, "I know what I'm doing." Another pause. His voice went very still. "I know, Eleanor." He used her first name when he was at the end of his patience, not rudely, as a marker. This conversation has reached its limit. Through the doorway, she caught a glimpse of him, standing at the window, one hand on the frame, looking out at the garden. The solitary posture, problem-solving or carrying something. She'd learned to tell the difference. This was carrying. Whatever his mother was pushing, it was something he'd been holding for longer than this phone call. She recognized the shape of that. The particular set of shoulders that came from carrying things you couldn't put down, in the specific way of someone who had been taught that putting things down was not available to them. She recognized it because she had been doing it her entire adult life. She finished watering the plants. She did not follow the thought any further. She almost managed not to. That night she stood at the kitchen window with her cold tea and looked out at the November garden. The garden was stripped back and honest. No summer fullness, just the bones of things. Hedge lines, the bare arms of the maple near the east wall, gray sky sitting low. Henry had come to the kitchen doorway at 7, while she was standing at the counter. She'd heard him and given herself 3 seconds to arrange her face before turning. He'd said, "There's a light under your door, you were working late again." She'd said, "How did you—" "I went upstairs for a book," he'd said, quietly. "Your light was on at midnight." She'd looked at him. He'd looked back at her. This white man with his composed dark eyes and his green sweater and the tired quality he carried when the day had been long. And said, "Go to sleep, Dorothy. You don't have to earn rest." Again. He'd said it again like it was simply true. Like it had always been true and she had just missed it. He'd left. She stood at the kitchen window now and looked at the garden and understood something she had been working very hard not to understand. She was, with the uncomfortable clarity of someone who has stopped being able to look away from something, in real trouble. Not the professional kind. The other kind. The kind that started with a tired black girl sitting on a bed for just a moment, and a quiet white man who covered her with a blanket rather than wake her, and somewhere between a kitchen and a notebook and a croissant that tasted like everything she was building toward, she had stopped being able to pretend. She looked at the garden. She thought, "Don't." She thought, "Too late." To be continued.